Welcome to a football show Thursday edition. That is Nick Suss of the Tennessean. Pay for good journalism. I am Braden Gall, and we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. We will have news, a little bit of news, a slow drip of news about our NFL draft plans for all of you and how you can come hang out with all of us, talk ball, watch ball, and help the kids. It's always about helping the kids. Nick, good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Helping kids. I like that. That's good. That's nice. Help a kids.
James is first. Good to see you, James. You do get the credit for that, of course. And Eddie already with questions in the comments. I do appreciate that. Do you think there's anything to the Saints rumors? I'm deluding myself that a trade could still happen. This is what we're going to talk about. What's the vibe check? What's the temp check on the Cam Ward smoke screen this week? After we went to a fancy restaurant on Sunday night, we went to a pro day where Cam told the Titans brass directly to their face, I'm going to be number one, basically, while on the practice field, which I think is hilarious. It just speaks to his personality type. Then, of course, they had a private workout. Then we had some news with other quarterbacks around the league. So we're going to get into the temp check on Cam Ward at number one. How convinced are we that that's happening? If they do take Cam Ward, we talked about this a little bit last week, prioritizing the positions. Now I want to know the names we like at 35 and at 103, or what a trade looks like for the team at that spot. I know we've spent some time on that as well. Eddie's already talking about some of the other rumors. There's a lot of other stuff that's happened around the NFL. Aaron Rodgers still available. Russell Wilson is signed. The Browns feel like they're intentionally being totally opaque and lying to everybody. And, of course, Kirk Cousins is still a factor in all of this, too, if the Falcons decide to trade him before the draft. That could mess with some stuff. And now, of course, there's some Saints stuff as well. So let's that's what we're going to do today on the show. Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Here's the key. Here's what you need to know about Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Nick, you have not been a part of the show the last 2 seasons. When we had our draft party on Thursday nights at the Track One building in Wedgwood, Houston, which is where Sinkers Beverages headquarters, their HQ, their worldwide headquarters are located. It is a beautiful, beautiful old building. And for many of you who have been at that event the last 2 years, it has been open bar and it has been catered by one of our amazing partners and sponsors here locally in the city. That will take place again this year. We're going to have tickets available for you, links available, but we're going to have a great time on Thursday night. Same kind of deal. We'll go live. Me and a couple of other distinguished 440 dignitaries are going to go live when the Titans go on the clock. We're going to have a big party. It's going to be a blast. All the money goes to Our Kids Foundation. Then we're going to have something special on Saturday for all you folks. Last year we had Friday night where we had a special Q&A with the former Titans player, a 5-flight bourbon tasting, and Lachlan table dinner. Fantastic. We're going to have something Saturday night for you guys, and the entire 440 crew is going to be there. So more details on that coming. Let me just say this, Nick. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue will be involved in the process.
Even after they're closed, the barbecue will be transported at a later hour than it's usually available, which is a perk.
That is correct. So Sinkers Beverages, all you can drink. Going to be fun. And, of course, they got a great building, great HQ there. We've spent a lot of time there over the years. It's a great place. And you guys were awesome. Sold out every ticket last year for Thursday and Friday. This year we're going to do Thursday, Saturday. We'll have links and more information for you. But just getting you guys excited about this. There's going to be lots of smart Titans people there. Maybe some surprises on Saturday. Maybe some extra cool stuff. More information on that coming. But we're finalizing those plans. But we're getting real close. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So do appreciate all you guys. Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue for supporting the kids, supporting you, the Titans fans, and, of course, supporting a football show. C. Rich says, you're deluding yourself, but it's possible if something ridiculous is offered, which I think most people would be okay with. Look, I have done the trading of the draft pick a million times, too, on here. You go down to 3, then you go back to 11. The guy I want more than anyone in the first round is Jaheed Campbell from Alabama. That's the guy I want, but I want him at like 11, 12, 13, and like 6 other picks. So that's probably not going to happen, but that's where I'm at on this. Let's start with the news around the NFL. Russell Wilson, 1-year, $21 million deal with the New York Giants. Does that have any impact, in your opinion, at all on the Giants' desire to trade to number 1 or the Titans' ability to trade out of number 1?
Desire, probably not, but leverage, yes. Like, you have a lot more leverage on saying, we don't need to do this. We've got a guy when you've got a guy. Like, no disrespect to Jameis Winston, no disrespect to Tommy DeVito. Russell Wilson is a different caliber of quarterback. So now the Giants can sit here and say, we got a guy. We can wait a year. It's a 1-year contract. We'll draft a guy next year. We don't have to give as much to move up 2 spots. And that changes the dynamic. It changes what level of bounty the Titans would be able to get back for what, let's face it, would be a very small trade back. Like, the perk of trading to 3 has always been, well, you can still get Carter or Hunter. That pipe dream might be losing its leverage. That idea of trade back and still get the best player available, which has always been the best case scenario, might not necessarily be the best way to get talent now. It might be a trade to 6, a trade to 7, a trade to 9, a trade to 11, whatever pick you want to call it that you have to move back to. You're going to get a lot more for that, but you're not going to get the guy.
Yep.
And we've talked about Travis Hunter. We've talked about Abdul Carter to death. There are going to be more Abdul Carters. There might not be more Travis Hunters by virtue of
probably not.
Probably not. But there might be more players of equal or greater value than Travis Hunter based off of positional need and value and all of these things. So if the question is it better to get number 3 this year and a future 2, or number 7 this year and a future 1, or something like that, you might be positioning yourself better just by virtue of next year's class could have more top-end talent. But the way the Giants are set up now, they can go quarterback, but it's not their A1 need anymore. They can survive 2025 with a arguable future Hall of Famer on the set.
And honestly, this is, and to Josh's question is, what's the least you'd feel okay about getting in a trade back to 3? This is, again, kind of a meandering conversation here. But I look at the Giants picks. They got 34, 65, 99. And they're not going to give you all 3 of those and like a first or a second next year. No. I think for 3, you don't need the first next year, which gives you the ability to maybe leverage a trade, right? Hey, we'll take a third this year instead of a first next year. Give us a second next year. We'll call it a deal. If you get, see, because this is ultimately why I think the Cam Ward conversation, I think one of the things that's lost in the Cam Ward conversation is Cam Ward definitively going to be the star quarterback for the Tennessee Titans? Is he good enough player to be traded for 4 players?
Yeah.
You have to trade him for you have to trade Cam Ward for Travis Hunter, and also let's go down the list here. Like, you're going to get maybe a starting safety, a starting middle linebacker, and a receiver, or an edge player and a receiver, and a second-round pick next year. Or like you have to say it's Travis Hunter, Luther Burden, and Braden Swinson for Cam Ward, plus a second next year. That's how you have to do the trade. Like, it's not that, and I know that's common sense, but I do think it's lost in the equation. It's like, oh, we passed on Cam Ward, but if you go to 3, you still get Travis Hunter. The question is about the Giants, and I think you answered it correctly. I agree. I don't think signing Russell Wilson precludes them from taking Cam Ward at all. No. At all. But are they as desperate to go up and get him? No. So no. I think you explained it perfectly.
And I think that I wrote this yesterday. You guys can check it out. I think that one of the things that is yet to be answered, and probably won't be answered because teams are cagey about this stuff, are the moves we've seen on the quarterback market more of a response to the league knowing the Titans like Cam Ward, or the league not liking Cam Ward? Now, both are possible ways to read this situation. There's also a third way to read the situation of the league just likes veteran quarterbacks, which we can talk about whether Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold are more preferable than a rookie who you've never seen before. But the dynamic at play here is every team that needs a quarterback, with the exception of the Titans, the Browns, and technically the Steelers, have gone out and gotten a quarterback this offseason. Now, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't sign with the Steelers, gigantic fumble, ridiculous situation that's happened there. But so in a draft where everybody has said for months and months and months, there's 2 quarterbacks. The 2 teams with the top 2 picks are the 2 that have not made a massive move in the quarterback market. Yep. That's Occam's razor right there. That is the simplest solution to what's happened. Is the teams around the league knew they weren't going to get one of the 2 guys. But there is also the distinct possibility that the teams around the league didn't want the two guys. And that's why, like, look, I looked this up yesterday. 2016, when the Titans traded out. I know I talk about this a lot, but it's the most recent time that a situation like this happened.
Yeah.
When the Titans traded out, the three biggest name quarterbacks that changed teams that offseason were Brock Osweiler, Chase Daniel, and a post-injury RG3.
Okay, gross.
Like, those were the guys that were getting the big AAV to switch teams. And then Fitzpatrick signed a big deal to stay with the Jets. Like, those were the big quarterback moves that offseason. So when you had a draft where there were only two good quarterbacks expected to happen, you had all these teams trying to trade up because the difference between Jared Goff and Carson Wentz at the top of the draft was Brock Osweiler or a post-injury RG3.
Yeah.
Now it's the difference between betting on Cam Ward or Sheduer Sanders or trying to get Russell Wilson, trying to get Aaron Rodgers, trying to get Sam Darnold, trying to get Justin Fields. The playing field's a little bit different. So I don't know. I think that both dynamics can be at play. Both can be true of the Titans really like Cam Ward. The league knew that the Titans really like Cam Ward. The league had good options to not overpay for Cam Ward.
Yep.
But you do have to look at the dynamic here of how many quarterbacks were available this offseason. And this isn't counting the Matthew Stafford saga. This isn't counting the Derek Carr saga that was alluded to at the beginning of this. There were a lot of quarterbacks that could have or did change teams.
Yeah. And I agree. It just changes the entire dynamic of the market. And I like what's fascinating is Cleveland just being completely like they're intentionally opaque about all of this. They're just like, no, you have no idea what we're doing, which I think is okay too. It's a fine strategy. The Titans are doing the opposite strategy, which is also a totally fine strategy. So I don't want to get into the temp check just yet because we do have to talk about Tim Boyle for a second, but which has zero impact on this conversation either. Let's see here. Let's get to some of these comments here. Let's see. C. Rich says without a 2026 first trade, without a 2026 first, a trade is weak. It's not worth it because you're going to need a quarterback next year, and if you're out of range, you'll need to get capital on. Let me, for example, and I did this right before we came on. I just wanted to try this. So I traded down to 3 with the Giants on one of these mock draft simulators, and I got the 34th, 65th, and 99th pick. Okay, so this is the trade that you're getting if you trade away Cam Ward. You don't trade away Cam Ward for Abdul Carter. I wanted Travis Hunter, but it gave me Abdul Carter, which is fine. I got Abdul Carter, Mike Green, Xavier Watts, Josh Connerly, Elijah Arroyo, and then Torrey Horton at 103. So what you're trading away when you trade away Cam Ward is Abdul Carter, Xavier Watts, Josh Connerly, and Elijah Arroyo. That's a tight end, a tackle, a safety, and 2 edges is what you get in exchange for Cam Ward. So again, just want to kind of reiterate that. I don't think you need the first next year. If you're moving down to 6 or 7, you got to have a first next year. I totally agree with that.
And to the second point of that comment, just reading some tea leaves here. If you're not drafting Cam Ward, I'm betting you're in position to get a quarterback next year.
Yeah. Yes, because Tim Boyle and Brandon Allen are going to be your 2 quarterbacks because Will Levis, Paul Karski is always grumpy about why Titans fans overvalue Titans players. Oh, why don't you just trade Treylon Burks? Why don't you just trade like Chidobe Awuzie? Why don't you just trade? Ironically, they did trade Kenneth Murray. But like, why don't you just trade these guys away? Well, people have to want them, and generally they don't. I do think someone would take a flyer on Will Levis.
Yeah.
I just think it's more like a 5th round pick or a 6th round pick or a 7th round pick. It's not going to be any, but young quarterback with talent, lots of physical ability, and under contract for cheap. There is a little bit of an asset there.
Yeah.
If you are done with him. And if you're going to ride Brandon Allen and Tim Boyle or Kyle McCord, for example, in the 5th round with Brandon Allen, and those are going to be your options this year, you're going to be picking top 5. You're going to have a really good pick next year in the draft.
Yeah. And look, what I'm going to say, we'll say later. Let's talk about the actual quarterbacks for a second.
Okay.
Tim Boyle. Yeah. Tim Boyle. I
thought you were pausing.
No. Tim Boyle. He's technically on the team.
I thought you were pausing for dramatic effect to then begin again. No, Tim Boyle signed, been around 8 years, backup quarterback. Like, I don't know if Tim Boyle and Brandon Allen are different people. They might actually be the same person, and no one's ever seen them in the same room before. So I don't know.
I find it endlessly fascinating that Tim Boyle is a professional football player.
Yeah,
He is much better at football than I am. He's much better at football than anybody watching the show. So I'm not going to insult him. But this is a guy who was not particularly dominant at Eastern Kentucky. He's on the roster. He's a body. Maybe he
changes nothing.
Maybe he takes that big year 13 jump dating back to college, but I don't know. I don't think that this is a long haul upgrade to the quarterback room.
No, it's not. I think for a long time, Nick, I have kind of had this weird gut feeling that like Levis is going to start more games than people think for the Titans. That they know they have a baseline of him, and from a talent perspective, it's a pretty high baseline for talent. You know, the rest of it, I think they know what they know about him. They've learned everything they need to know. He's not the answer, etc. But if you're not going to get Cam Ward, you're not going to go get a big name like Sam Darnold. What's the harm in running out your guy again? You know, right. Like what is Jacoby Brissett by you that Will Levis is not going to give you also? You know what I'm saying? Like, so I always thought, man, people need to be prepared if they don't take Cam Ward that Will Levis probably starts more than you think. Now I'm kind of coming around on. I think Levis is more likely to be traded after the draft and before camp. Where are you at on the trade Will Levis situation?
I don't know. I kind of have the timeline of it behooves him to play a preseason game or two. And if they want to do right by him, let him play in camp, get some reps in the preseason, and then opposing scouts get a look at what he looks like in year 2 in a system. I don't know.
I could be on board with that.
If you treat him like Josh Rosen, if you draft Cam Ward on Thursday and trade Will Levis on Friday, I don't think anybody would be shocked.
Yeah.
But
I'm on board with that.
But I wouldn't be shocked if it gets extended into August.
Yeah. All right. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything else from the big picture quarterback conversation that, I mean, again, Cousins could be a wild card here at some point if Arthur Blank decides to not be stubborn and wants to trade him for something. But other than that, it does feel like the dominoes and the carousel is starting to settle down a little bit, which I guess brings us to the temp check here, which is, again, very important when you're smoking meat. You got to be checking that you get to that 225, you get to that stall. You got to figure it out. You got to push on through it. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue is a great place for that. Open 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. every single Wednesday through Sunday. And we'll be a part of our draft party coming up as hosted by Sinkers Beverages, 4-time liquor store of the year. All right, so the temp check on Cam Ward. They go to take him to a fancy dinner at a fancy Miami restaurant on Sunday night. They go do the pro day, which everybody raves about. Kaharski has an article where they, he's breaking down the Zapruder film on Cam Ward, looking over at Borgonzi and Brinker. And then, of course, they have a private workout. Everybody else in the league is down there looking at all the players and Cam Ward as well. You and I haven't spoken since all of that took place on Thursday of last week. Where are you at on what you saw this week? What does it mean to you? And what's your temp check on how telegraphed, how real this is? This is just going to be a question I'm going to ask you every Thursday from here on out.
Do you want to rename it how's the water Tim boiling? Is that a better temp check name? Yeah, really impressed. Didn't throw a single interception during his pro day. That's amazing, right? That's impressive. No interceptions against air.
The defense didn't get a single finger on the football.
No sacks, no tipped passes.
I know. Very impressive.
Look, I'm not somebody who says pro days are meaningless. It is fun to watch pro days. It is fun to see how he interacts with his teammates, how he was prepared, how he was essentially captaining the pro day. It seemed like he was the one either calling the routes or keeping up with the tempo of how everything was going. You got to see the leadership that we all have been talking about and hearing about this entire process. The intense, demanding, I'm in control of the situation thing. And I can't remember if it was the NFL Network crew or the ACC Network crew, whichever broadcast I was flipping between, but them talking about this idea of you can tell based off of the way he's like giving the water breaks that like this is his situation. that he is the one who is dictating how this pro day is going to go.
Yeah.
And you do that in front of the scouts. Good. Like, they got to see up close and personal how he behaves. Will he be the kind of guy that can walk in at 22, 23 years old and look at a bunch of 30-year-olds in a locker room and say, I'm in charge now? I think so. It's up to the 30-year-olds to buy it. But yeah, I was impressed by the pro day. If you're going to ask what's the temp check, I've been saying it since February. Before the combine, I thought the trade was most likely. After the combine, I have thought Cam Ward is most likely. With every week and with every signing, it becomes more and more likely. But I refuse to rule it out, not because Borgonzi is saying, oh, we're going to, everything's on the table. Like, I'm not sitting here saying, well, he said it, so it must be true. I'm saying more like teams will get antsy. For all the talk we've had about quarterbacks and all of the movement this offseason, Russell Wilson's on a 1-year contract. Geno Smith is on a 1-year contract. Justin Fields is on a 2-year contract. Sam Darnold, essentially on a 1-year contract. They can buy out of that contract for pretty cheap next year. So all of these teams that have their stopgaps, it's a pretty short stopgap. All of these situations are not full yet. People are saying, what's the sus level? We need a sus level, put a number on it. 75, 80% likelihood at this point. I mean, it might be higher. I'm not sitting here. I don't speak in absolutes. I'm sorry, guys. I'm never gonna. I'm gonna tell you it's 100% certain when the pick is in, because you never know. The Colts could call and say, we're going to give you 19 first-round picks for it. We don't want Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones anymore. We'll give you our next decade of
19.
Like, I don't know. Anything could happen. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm not gonna speak in certitudes.
Oh, this is great. This is great. QC, what's bigger news this week? Cam Ward's pro day or Will Campbell's arm length, which is, of course, an ongoing saga where, like 3 different measurements. And like, here's the, I think I saw a good take on this. Arm length matters in general. It may not matter if Will Campbell's a great football player.
Yeah.
But the differentiation between all the different things don't matter because the teams have the actual measurements. So
yeah. And I look, 2 years ago, I was sitting here in the spring and in the summer being like, I don't care about arm length. Let Peter Skoronski play left tackle. Let's see if he can do it. I'm going to say the same thing about Will Campbell. Let's see if he can do it. I don't care about the arm length.
I kind of agree. I mean, it does. Again, it does matter in general. It may not matter with Will Campbell. That's how you have to look at those things. Like you and I talked about the size thing, or is it me and PK that talked about the size thing? I think we talked about it on Monday a little bit. Anyway,
but no, it's like, I don't know. One of the things that kind of irks me is defensive maneuvering instead of productive maneuvering of, well, we don't want to do the thing that might not work, so let's just not do it. And then you don't do a thing that could be great. Like, what's the worst thing that happened if you go back in a time machine 2 years ago and force Vrabel and Tim Kelly to say, no, you got to play Skoronski at left tackle. Yeah. He's bad at it and you move him to guard? Like, if the bad outcome is the thing you're going to do anyway, why not try for the good outcome and then see what happens? Yeah, it's like, you guys have heard me say that I am weary of people who were not great prospects in December who are suddenly great prospects in January. I tend to be somebody who doesn't want to move the board very much after college football season ends.
I agree.
And that is my fear with Armand Membu. Of just like, he was a good college football player. We watched him in the SEC. He's good. Like, I'm not sitting here denigrating him or anything. But if you watched a full 3 seasons of college football and thought, well, Will Campbell's better than Armand Membu, what has changed? What has changed?
I tend to agree.
And Kelvin Banks, why are we overthinking this one? He was really good at Texas.
Really good football player. No, I agree. That's why there's a lot of those names that kind of like Donovan Ezaraku, who's the guy we're going to talk about, the pass rusher for Boston College. He's going to be a name that they're going to target potentially late first, early second round. That's a guy that's going to be around there. He was nowhere to be found in the rankings.
That one's a little different because at least he was incredibly productive in college. I just think people weren't watching BC. So I think there might have been a consensus miss versus guys who were literally in the SEC playing for teams that went to New Year's Six bowls. But we'll see.
Is it certain or is it sus?
Yeah, it's in between.
Okay. Here's how I would describe it.
It's not sus. I'll say that.
I would describe it similarly to how you described it, which was going into the combine. I was probably like 2080. They should trade out, and about 2080 they would trade out. I think I came out of the combine going 2080. They should trade out. Haven't really changed on that. I still think they should trade out. But that it's more like 60, 40, 60 they're going to trade. And now last week it was 50-50 trade Cam, and now I'm sort of 60-40 they're drafting Cam. It's just slowly kind of creeping, like let's call it 10% every week or whatever. And by the time that puts us at about 100-0 when we get to the draft. If a great offer comes along, your job is to be prepared to take it and to understand that it's too good to pass up. Yeah. By the way, so I slept. My wife got up this morning to go get ready for work, and I kind of fell back asleep, and I woke up. Normally I get the kids up and I have to get them going for school, and I do all the breakfast stuff. This has a point, trust me. I fell back asleep. So like I got up late, and then the kids are late, and then we're all rushing to get out to get the door to get to school. And I'm sitting there making lunches for them while they're eating their breakfast. And I'm standing there, and I was like, look, guys, we let you sleep in. All right. We let you sleep in. And if we're going to let you sleep in, you guys got to move quickly, which is doing the dad thing of like telling them, I didn't do this wrong, honey. This wasn't my fault. I gave you something, which really I just fell back asleep on accident. And I'm like making, ham sandwiches for their lunches or whatever. And she looks at me and she goes, my 8-year-old looks at me and goes, that's Cap. I was like, God damn it. It didn't take as long as I thought it was going to take. I thought it was going to take longer before you started saying this stuff, because my little one says sus all the time. And I was like, honey, where'd you learn how to say that? And she goes, not that I don't care. And I know the answer, school. And she goes, yeah, everybody says it. And I was like, okay. I was like, if you're going to say it, you can't say it's a Cap. You have to say that's Cap if you're going to say it right. Okay, say it right, honey. Anyway, I don't know why. The fact that sus is always coming up like this.
The amount of time that
Skibbity toilet.
The amount of time that I spent as an engaged person trying to convince my now wife, hey, you don't have to take my last name. Like, it's going to be a hassle for you.
Oh, it took me 10 years to get my wife to change her name.
No, immediate. She took it immediately. And I'm just like, it's going to be a hassle. People have a weird thing about this word now. It's going to be a thing that children forever are going to make fun of the last. Children for the next 10 to 12 years are going to make.
Yes, because then they'll grow up and be young adults and then become parents, and then they'll say it, and then their kids are going to be like, we can't say that because they know what it means. We have to change our language so that they don't know what we're talking about. That's all this is trying to hide their communications from their parents. That's all it is. We don't want the old people to know what we're talking about. It's sort of like a draft. It's sort of like the draft news.
It's
the draft
not like
coverage.
that.
Yeah, it's all subterfuge. It's all subterfuge.
I love the idea of that's what the Browns have been doing all along. They've just been really sincerely using Gen Z slang, and other GMs have no idea.
That's what I'm saying. All these GMs are like old white guys. They don't know what's going on.
Andrew Barry's out here using Cap, and
Cam Ward walks by and goes, "Skibbity toilet, dog," and Mike Baganzi's like, "What? What are you talking about?" Coach Will says, my daughters say I'm cooked. I say that one a lot. Back to my original point. I say, man, I got cooked on that one, or I got cooked, or she got like, they haven't gotten to that one yet. All right. Anyway, Josh says, sounds like she listens to Pod Bless Nashville. That is true. My co-host on PBN has a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old son, and he has to know all these words. And that's where I've learned all these words, is from another dad. Because he has to know. All right. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, Sinkers, Beverages. All right. Do you want to get into, did you put a number on it? Are you going to put a number on it?
Yeah, I said like 70, 75.
70. Okay. I'm kind of in that ballpark too. I don't think it's like, there's a lot of folks in the Titans media that are saying it's a done deal. And I don't think it's a done deal, and to your point, until Roger Goodell is standing there on the podium with the card and says Cam Ward, Tennessee Titans. Until that happens, I am not.
It is beneficial when something approaches over 50% likelihood to stake your flag in the ground and say, well, I've known it all along, because odds are you're going to be right.
Right.
So like, that's not calling anybody out. That's just good math. If you think it's going to happen, say it's going to happen. I am a coward, so I will not do that.
Well, Joe's got a good comment here that I'm going to get to, but basically, like it feels like I've gotten a lot of heat in the comment section from the folks that watch this show afterward that aren't watching live or listening live that say, Braden, why do you hate Cam Ward so much? And I'm always like, guys, stop crashing out on me. I think Cam Ward would be great for business, and there's a chance Cam Ward could be really, really good at football, and he's really good for my business. So I'm pro drafting Cam Ward. If you're asking me what I think is best for the Titans, it is drafting 5 players in the top 100 that retool the roster in one season. That's what I think. And I just used crashed out perfectly because Joe says I started saying crashing out because I have to say that to my 8-year-old when she starts to crash out. Honey, stay composed. Don't lose control. Don't crash out. Legendary crash out. There you go. PK was crashing out all last week. That's funny. Do you know what that means?
I only speak the Queen's English.
It just means like losing control, getting pissed off, yelling and screaming. Okay, just making sure. I speak the King's. Okay. Here's what I want to ask you then. If you take Cam Ward at 1, you got to go back and do a lot of stuff. You got to figure out what's going on. We talked about the prioritization of edge versus receiver last year, and yes, we're going to talk about uniforms. We are going to talk about uniforms. All right, so just hang tight on that. But if you do take Cam Ward, I want to know your priority. Like, give me actual names this time. Like, give me some edge, give me some receiver. If you trade, this is where if you trade back, you can take one of, because there's lots of value in that space around maybe Xavier Watts being one of the best safeties in the draft. You can get Benjamin Morrison, maybe one of the best corners in the draft. Not a lot of great receivers at 35 unless somebody falls. Yep. You might be able to get a really good, you probably would be able to get a very good offensive lineman, somebody that could help your offensive line long-term if that's where you wanted to go. You might be able to get the number 1 off-ball linebacker. Now I can't even remember how to say his name. Schweichenberger or whatever his name is from UCLA. People love that guy. Like there are really good players at other positions that maybe don't hit the top 2 positions of need. And there's not a lot of great options at receiver and edge at 35. And if you trade back, which is what you need to do to like 40 or 45, it gets even more difficult. The idea then is that you get a pick in the 60s or 70s that help you fill that gap in your draft, right?
Yeah.
So give me the names at edge that you think the Titans fans should know at 35 or thereabouts that you like for the Titans. Because if you take Cam Ward, you have a glaring hole at probably edge 1 and maybe even edge 2 or 3, depending on how good you think Draymond Jones is.
Yeah. So I am of the opinion that one of the following 4 players is going to fall into the second round. Mike Green is the least likely of this bunch, but he is the first of the 4.
He is 19th overall in the consensus mock big board.
And then you have James Pierce Jr.
He's number 22.
Nick Scorton, and Donovan Ezeraku.
Scorton is 37. Ezeraku is 33.
One of these 4, potentially 2, but I'll stick to 1, is probably going to fall into the second round. Just by virtue of how many pass rushers are going to go in the first round, especially if you're counting guys like Jalen Walker and Jaheed Campbell among the pass rushers.
I think those are the 4 names.
I think that one of those guys is going to fall. So if you have the possibility to get Nick Scorton, he is probably more likely to project as a edge rusher 2 in the future. But if you compare him with Draymond Jones and Lorenzo Carter this year, and Arden Key still on the roster, that is serviceable enough, especially if you're expecting the interior pass rush to be the thing that drives the defense. It's serviceable enough to call yourself an NFL defense, let me say. It is not serviceable enough to be a top half of the NFL defense or anything like that.
Honestly, go ahead.
I was going to say beyond that, that's where you get into the range of Landon Jackson, Princely Emmanuel. I would stay away from Landon Jackson just on lack of productivity in college.
Let's stay with the top 4, and then I want to get to that next tier. So the top 4, I agree, Mike Green, James Pierce, Ezeraku, Scorton. That's 19, 22, 33, and 37 overall on the consensus big board. Just take that for what it's worth. The Titans have actually made a killing, relatively speaking, to draft value with this area of the draft. If you look at A.J. Brown, if you look at Christian Fulton, if you look at Harold Landry, again, I'm not talking about how they turned out. I'm saying relative to their value in the draft. And honestly, those are, of the picks they've made in those spots, those are 3 pretty good picks. I mean, 1 elite pick, 1 really good pick, 1 eh. But those are names that had graded out first rounds that fell into the second round. It happens every single year. There are plenty of them. And because you're picking 35, I mean, Will Levis was one of them. Hell, because you're picking 35, I'm with you. I think you can circle those 4 names and say, I'm going to get one of them. I think, and there's a lot of folks in the comments that are saying, look, you want 4 quarterbacks taken in the first round. You want 3 running backs in the first round. I don't think a third running back goes. Genty, Hampton, and Johnson, all 3 could go.
I'm thinking of Henderson.
I think Henderson. I agree. I think Henderson is the number 2 running back potentially.
I agree.
But here's the other position that you think could be defensive tackle. There are a lot of really good defensive tackles that are not graded out top 10, but are graded out sort of in that 15 to 40 range. You know, Harmon and Grant and Tyreek Williams out of Ohio State. Like, there's a lot of good tackles. And Walter Nolan. You want all those guys to get pushed up boards. And if all those guys get pushed up boards, you're going to get one of these 4 guys. Because if we want to talk then about the next tier, I do think I agree with you. So the next tier on the mock is Landon Jackson at 44, Jack Sawyer at 50, out on him. JTT at 56, I could be convinced. Princely Umanmielen at 60, Jordan Birch at 73, Braden Swinson at 75, and Josiah Stewart at 81. I don't trust any of them to be the answer for your edge problem. I think you have to get one of those 4 that are first, which means if you trade back to 45 and you're stuck with JTT, he's the only one that I like out of that group, out of that next group down, unless you're picking in the 60s or 70s because you've traded back and you're getting one of them at value. None of those guys at 45 make any sense to me. You need the value from the first round to fall.
Okay. You want to talk more about that or get to receiver?
No, go for it. Go for it.
All right. Receiver, your options.
No. Talk more about the edge guys.
Yeah. I like JTT. I can be talked into Sawyer. Not a big Landon Jackson guy.
Agree.
Umanmielen, different kind of pass rusher. He's going to be more of a finesse speed guy. So if you can pair him with the right stuff. We have a question here that's, are these guys better than Prime Landry? I think that's Ed. Yeah. And I think that what we need to understand when we're talking about Prime Harold Landry is the dynamic that was at play of this Titans defense at large, of how much was Harold Landry benefiting from Jeffrey Simmons, Danico Autry, Bud Dupree, these other players that were around him, and how sticky the cornerbacks were, how good the safety play was, how good the defense overall was. He was somebody who was able to generate production because of the surrounding cast. And I think that a lot of these guys are people who we saw do that in college. By virtue of the way Ohio State's defense was set up, we saw Jack Sawyer and JTT benefit from having a lot of good talent around them. By virtue of the way Texas A&M's roster was set up, we saw Nick Scorton do this. I think there are guys who can, yes, be 10 sack a year guy on a good defense. But if you're asking, can these guys be 10 sack a year guy, 12 sack a year guy, independent of the supporting cast? I think you're looking at 2 guys in this draft who could probably be that, in Abdul Carter and Michael Williams. Beyond that,
Jaheed Campbell.
Never seen him do it.
That's
he might be able to do it. Never seen him do it.
That's my guy. He's a bigger Nolan Smith.
But that is kind of my read on this second tier, is that it falls off after this group.
Yeah, it does.
But
it's funny, like, you know how I've been comparing Cam Ward to Baker Mayfield. That I think if you get Baker Mayfield in the first pick with Cam Ward, that's sort of the bar for just making the decision. Like, if you think you're going to get Baker Mayfield, you probably need to pick him. If you don't think you're going to get Baker Mayfield, don't pick him. And so that's kind of where I'm at with Cam. I think this is an interesting strategy with the Harold Landry comparison. If you're picking at 35 or 40 or 45 in that range, and you think you're going to get Harold Landry, which again is not an elite pass rusher, but a pretty solid high-end number 2, let's call it.
Yeah.
A low-end 1, a high-end 2. And you think you're going to get Harold Landry, then you take him. That's what I think. And I think here's how I would break this down, and I'm just sort of seeing this in my rankings. I think Mike Green and James Pierce are absolutely better than what Harold Landry would give you. I think they have a chance to be top-flight pass rushers. If either of those 2 falls to you at 35, there is a reason that either one of those 2 guys would fall to you at 35. That's concerning. I think Ezaraku and Scorton are going to be graded out perfectly as Harold Landry, like production-wise, as Harold Landry level player. like war, wins above replacement, 0.0. It's not negative. It's not positive. You're getting about Harold Landry with those two guys, which is why I like them if they fall to you at 35.
The HLAR, Harold Landry's above replacement.
I think JTT is the next best player in this group. And if this team did not have Sweat and Campbell, if it did not have Sweat and Simmons and Jones and Sebastian Joseph Day, I would think less of JTT. But I think putting JTT with that collection of players gives JTT a chance to be a Harold Landry-esque player. Everybody else is a negative. What was it? HLAR.
Yeah.
Everybody else is below Harold Landry. I'm not touching Jack Sawyer unless you're getting him in the 4th round. I don't think he has elite level NFL skill. Your comment about Princely is interesting, that he's this smaller, thinner guy. I do think that pairs well with Sebastian Joseph Day and Draymond Jones.
Yeah.
I do think you don't need a big burly Michael Williams. You kind of have that. You kind of have a cheap version of that with Jones and Sebastian Joseph Day. You need the bendy guy, which is why I love Campbell and Jalen Walker, but that's neither here nor there. That's sort of how I would look at it. If you're going to trade back to 50 or 60, that Braden Swinson, Josiah Stewart, and Jordan Birch are the next tier. Yeah. Interesting players, but you need to get them in the 80s or 90s to call that value.
Braden Swinson, really interesting guy in the sense that why did he only do it for 1 year?
Yeah.
He was a 4 or 5 year guy in college football and high level college football. And he had one impressive season. I'd like to dig more into what the difference between the breakout year was.
Yeah. A couple of interesting comments here about Green. Green is a PR nightmare, but you don't hesitate to make the pick. C. Rich, this is a good question. Outside of the top 15 to 17, is there elite production in this draft? No, probably not. Although I think there are really good running backs and tight ends late in the draft that will eventually be great players. But I think what you have to look at if you're a Titans fan, and again, if you want to look at just glance at a mock draft, I traded down to 3 with the Giants, and I picked up Ezra Raku at 34, Benjamin Morrison at 35, Jalen Noel at 65, Terrence Ferguson at 99. That is a group of players that if you can flip your roster, that is the key with the trade back, is that you could grab so many like B players, B-plus players. They're not elite. They're not going to give you elite production, but they are so many starting caliber players in that 30 to 75, 30 to 100 range.
So what C. Rich is getting at, and put his most recent comment on the board, we're going to have to talk about philosophy, not production here. The question isn't, are you going to get more elite production from trading back versus picking Cam Ward? The question is, when do you want the elite production on the roster? Because if you have one elite player and nothing to surround him with, it's not going to do anything. It's like there's a comment way back that I think we zoomed past. It might have been Jason or somebody that said, if you can get a hypothetical quarterback next year, you can also do a hypothetical trade back next year, which is true.
Yeah.
But when you talk about trading back, what we're really talking about here is, when do you want the quarterback? Do you want the quarterback this year and the trade back next year? Meaning that 27 is when you're getting the reaping of talent to surround that quarterback, heading into his 3rd year, where he is finally in his prime. You have a Josh Allen type ascent in year 3. Or do you want a roster fully formed around the quarterback so that when the quarterback steps in, he's insulated? These are the two roster building philosophies. So it's less when I'm talking about trading back, and I can't speak for everybody else, but when I'm talking about trading back, it's less about how good is the player, and it's more about what do you want the quarterback to come into. And so I personally come from the philosophy. I've always attributed this quote to Bill Parcells. I do not know if that's true. I've never been able to find the quote. But there's this quote that I've always heard, which is, when you're building a team, you draft the quarterback last. You build your offensive line first, then you build the perimeter, then you get the quarterback. So the virtue of trading back is not about, oh, you're trading back because you're going to get great players. You're trading back because you're building a foundation. And I think the quarterback is the cherry on top. I don't think the quarterback is the straw that stirs the drink, to mix cliches. But other people disagree. Other people say, go get the quarterback. It'll fix it all. It worked in Washington last year. It worked in Houston last year. But you know what people aren't talking about? the gigantic free agent moves that Houston made to set up
Right.
CJ Stroud for success
Right.
and that Washington made to set up Jaden Daniels for success. None of this invalidates the idea of drafting Cam Ward. It's just purely philosophical of when do you want to insert a quarterback into a roster that needs a quarterback?
I do think you have to pair your analysis of the quarterbacks, though. Like, if you think
Sure.
Arch Manning right now is clearly ahead of Cam Ward, I personally might have Drew Aller and Garrett Nussmeier ahead of Cam Ward, but I don't know. The more I do this, I think I'd have Drew Aller behind Cam Ward. I might have Garrett Nussmeier ahead of Cam Ward, but I definitely have Arch Manning ahead of him. So you have to do that too. You have to have a general sense of where you like about it. But I also agree, like, if you go get, like, so the Titans need a like sort of a starting number 2 linebacker, let's call it, next to Cody Barton. They probably need a safety long term behind Woods or Hooker, somebody legitimate. They might need a number 4 corner. All of that you can probably get later in the draft. Running back, you can get very good running back later in the draft. Where they are now, you don't need to trade. You can kind of piecemeal it together. You could probably get a tight end in the 4th or 5th round. In fact, Terrence Ferguson is a guy that I liked. I think I was like raving about him at the Senior Bowl with you guys. Number 1 yak tight end in the college game, big frame, fast player. I don't know why this guy isn't talked about with Mason Taylor and some of these other names as like a 2nd or 3rd round pick. Well, it turns out he's moving up boards. If you want him, you probably have to take him at 103 if he's available. So you can do so much with all those picks if you can get receiver and edge and taken care of in the first 100 picks. And you can only really do that if you trade one of them, either 1 or 35. I agree with your point. I personally, because I've also played with the mocks this week and traded back and then drafted all defense. Like, take players you wouldn't normally take and then that are kind of off the beaten path, right? Trade back to 11, take Campbell or Walker or Williams, get your pass rusher there. And then you can come back and you can go, I'm going to take a middle linebacker, I'm going to take a safety, I'm going to take a corner, I'm going to take a defensive tackle and an offensive lineman, and just build and totally flip the defense and turn the defense into a high-level top 10, top 5 type of defense with one draft. And if you do that, whoever steps into quarterback next year is in a really good spot because you have a bunch of young talent on offense. You've invested in the offensive line. You've got Ridley still under contract, at least for now. You've invested in Pollard and Spears. Like, you can make do if Arch Manning is the guy or if Garrett Nussmeier is the guy. I tend to agree with your philosophy, which is build the roster first, flip it, then drop the quarterback in. But you have to then agree that all the quarterbacks are kind of about the same.
Right.
Like, you have to, if you think Cam Ward is so good that you got to take him, then you got to take him. And I'm okay with that, but you need to tell us that. And when they take him, that's the message they're sending.
And for those of you in the comments who don't agree with us, we're not saying you're wrong.
Right.
Like,
don't crash out on us. Don't crash out.
This is a matter of pure football philosophy where, like, I look at the way that I would build a team, and I'm not in charge of building a team, but I look at the way that I would build a team, and I would say when you make the largest investment, you should be close to success. You should not make the largest investment and say, oh, shoot, how are we going to do this now? And the Titans have not made moves this offseason that indicate they are close to being competitive yet. No. They are making foundational moves. So when you make building block move, building block move, building block move, building block move, future move, it's a little bit dissonant.
So C. Rich says the Eagles were, let me make sure I can find it here because I went and looked it up. Eagles were drafting quarterbacks almost every year trying to hit. That's just not true because I've studied the Eagles draft a lot because I think since they drafted Jalen Hurts, it's been a fascinating case study in how to build a team. We've talked about it. But they drafted Carson Wentz in 2016 and they drafted Jalen Hurts in 2020. And those are the only 2 quarterbacks they drafted anywhere near the top rounds until 2013, they drafted Matt Barkley. They drafted Nick Foles in the 3rd round in 2012. So I don't know if that counts, but 12 Nick Foles won a Super Bowl, 13 Matt Barkley, 16 Carson Wentz, and only one in the first round of any of these players. They drafted 1 quarterback in the first round in 15 years, 20 years. So I see what you're saying. I think they, I mean, I don't want to say they got lucky with Hurts in the 2nd round because that's a good pick, but I don't know if there's another team that drafts 2 quarterbacks other than the Cardinals. They went back-to-back with Rosen and Murray, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked into this in the past when the Titans drafted Levis directly after drafting Malik. I believe there are 6 instances, I can't remember them all off the top of my head, where teams drafted quarterbacks in the top 3 rounds back-to-back years in the last since 2010 or something like that. It's rare. It doesn't happen very, very often. But in every single instance that's ever happened, the guy who got drafted first got traded or cut. So teams don't hold on to multiple quarterbacks. They will ditch the old model for the new model pretty quick.
You don't draft the second guy and say, let's see him battle it out. You draft the second guy because you already have enough information to make a verdict on the first guy, is what you're saying. Jake says, I'd love for us to be bluffing hard. I'd love it. What if it's Sanders at number 1? We trade down, get extra picks, and draft Sheduer Sanders. Look, if you're picking 6, 7, 10, 12, 13, I could be on board with Sanders as a risk there. I just think I think the gap is too great at this point. Even if Sanders does get picked by the Browns at number 2, because they've been lying about it the whole time. Like, I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about something that's completely out in left field? Because I tried this on the mock draft too, where I traded down to like 10 or 11. I drafted Tyler Warren. Because if you trade back, the other thing the trade back does, not to continue to harp on this, but the other thing that the trade back does is it opens up your positions in the first round.
Yeah.
If you go back to 8, 9, or 10, you're not married to anything. You can take the superstar at a position. I don't think Ashton Genty is that, but he would be considered that. Tyler Warren or Malachi Starks or somebody at a different position that does help your team because he's an elite player in that category of eliteness that we're talking about, because you're going to get a bunch of other picks. So it does open up your first round pick as well to go after something different than you didn't expect that you could go after. That helps you win. So
can we pause for a second and mention that Jake just described Aaron Rodgers by saying not much noise? I think that would be a lot of noise.
Also feels Rodgers is one to watch. Not much noise. I think he's saying there's not much noise right now.
Oh, okay. I'm like, he'd bring noise. He would bring plenty of noise, except for when he's on silent retreats.
Again, good for content for Aaron Rodgers to be here.
For content.
I also think Aaron Rodgers gives you a floor of production in a Callahan quick passing offense that is better than people realize. I'm not saying they're going to win games and be a champion here, but I think the system works with Rodgers.
Yeah. And to the Sanders point, I can agree with what other reporters have said, and I can validate that opinion of, they have Ward ahead of Sanders. This is not subterfuge.
I tend to agree with that as well. Let's see here, some other comments. Let's see here. Okay, let's get to wide receiver then.
Sure.
At 35, because we're running out of time. Same kind of conversation. Who are the names? Like Tevin Millen's not going to fall. I don't think he's going to fall. I do think there's talk about Emeka Egbuka or Luther Burden falling to 35. And while I don't think that is an immediate fix for your team, I don't think I could pass on either of those two names if they're there at 35.
No, I agree. I think if you are asking me who is the better wide receiver, I would say Luther Burden. If you're asking me who I would rather have to help Cam Ward in a new offense, I would probably take Egbuka.
I love both of them.
They're both.
I love
both guys. I would pick in the top 20 and have no idea why they're falling into the early 30s to the early second round. I've seen the rumors about Luther Burden and his character. They do contradict what I have heard about Luther Burden from speaking to people who have known him his college career.
He's not Kyron Lacey, guys.
Yeah, that is a little bit contradictory to what I've known about him through his college experience, but I believe what I believe. No character concerns have ever come up about Emeka Egbuka. I wonder if that's just pure athleticism concerns, but
he is a consummate professional wide receiver.
I would say the only thing that I'm willing to put in ink right now is Emeka Egbuka. I hope you love high elevation. I hope you love mountain air, because I have a feeling you are a Denver Bronco. It just feels very Sean Payton, very Broncos. They've spent this entire offseason like, we want a big guy. We want the big guy. And they'll go out and get Emeka Egbuka.
I want a 6'1" guy who's open all the time and never drops any passes.
Yeah.
He runs a perfect route every time.
That is a Sean Payton wide receiver.
Yeah, it's true. With a quarterback who's all about short, quick passes, accuracy, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the thing. This is why the trade down thing for me is so important. If you're on the clock at 35, and let's say Ezraku and Scorton are both there, and you think, and you're okay with JTT, The perfect strategy, if Cam Ward is the guy, is to draft Cam Ward 1, go from 35 to 40-ish, take the edge player that fell, and then use that pick in the 60s or 70s, the extra pick you got to move up, to draft Jalen Knoll or Jack Besh or the guy that you think is the receiver that belongs right there in that spot. Because there's 2 or 3 good ones. Those are the 2 that I like. There's 2 or 3 good ones that will not, none of them will be there at 103. That's the problem. None of these edge guys are worth it, and none of the receivers at 103 are going to be worth it. Torrey Horton, Ricky White, Nash, maybe Deontay Thornton. These are guys all with flaws that remind me of Des Fitzpatrick. Not the player, but like remind me of taking Des Fitzpatrick.
Right.
You're just drafting a guy, and maybe he's good, maybe he's not. I want Knoll at 68 or something like that, or Jack Besh at 81 or something like that.
Yeah, I have not hidden the fact that I'm not super high on the second and third round receiver talents this year. Not even your beloved Jalen Knoll.
Don't you talk about him.
I've not been able to come all the way around. Iomanor, I am intrigued
I like him.
by.
I like him.
I like to compare how good players are against the best players they play against. It's like the problem with the Nick Nash argument of how good he was in the 3 games against absolute nobody competition. Iomanor had like 300 yards against Travis Hunter.
He's a good. I know. I like him too.
He's a good player. Beyond that, Besh could be fine. He could be a solid number 2 or 3.
Let me look at. So here's the top 100 guys on the consensus, just for the sake of this exercise. We'll go. 96 is Tez Johnson. He's not going to be there at 103, and he may not be that good in the 3rd round as a pick. He's a nice player though. Let's see. Savion Williams, I don't think that he's at 91. I don't want him. If
you can get him at 102, think about it.
Maybe. Yeah, I guess. Let's see. Jalen Royals, nice player. Don't think it's worth it as a 3rd round pick. Xavier Restrepo, nope, no thanks. Jalen Knowles, the guy I like. Isaiah Bond, nope, don't need him. I think he's fine if at 102 or 3, but I don't think he's going to make it there. Jack Besh, I like a lot. Iomanor, I like a lot. Trey Harris, fine, but you're going to have to take him at 35 or 40, and I don't think I think they're going to think they're redoing the fans are going to be like, oh, A.J. Brown part 2. No. Good player, but I don't think he's as explosive.
He's much more DK Metcalf than A.J. Brown.
Yes, exactly. And so I don't like there's a big void of stuff in there. There's not a lot there in 40, 45 range. The edge is the pick at 35 or with whatever you do with that pick. And then in order to get a top level receiver that can help you right away and help Cam Ward, you can't wait till after 100. You got to get back into the 3rd round somehow. That's the strategy here with Cam Ward at 1.
So one thing that I was ranting about yesterday, and I'll try and keep this quick, is I was ranting to my dad because he was repeating that thing that everybody always repeats about how the toughest thing to do in sports is hit a baseball. And that might be true, that might not be true, but it's just something that like Howard Cosell probably said in the 70s and everybody's just believed since because we heard one guy say it. And I am really cautious to not just believe something that somebody said at the beginning of a process and carry it with us. The strength of this draft is between picks 30 to 100. I don't know. Maybe this draft doesn't have a strength.
That's what I said.
Maybe this just isn't a great draft.
No, it's not, but I do think there's value in those slots. But the problem is the offensive line was where all that value was in that area. It's running back, linebacker, offensive line, and the Titans don't need any of those in that spot. They're not going to invest in that spot.
Yeah. Austin, to answer your question, yes. I would take Travion Henderson in the 3rd over the best wide receiver available just on pure value. But that would pretty much be admitting that Tajay Spears is not a factor in your future and hoping that you can get value for him. So,
Steve Smith compared Jaden Higgins to Mike Evans. Higgins is the other receiver. I think Jaden Higgins is a slightly better Nick Westbrook-Akine.
Value.
Certainly, but not a 2nd round, but not a 40 pick overall.
Not in the top 40. Yeah, I don't know. If you look at the last 5 years, I believe there's been an average of 4 trades between picks 33 and 42. Those first 10 picks of the 2nd round almost always get traded. If teams are looking to get up to get one of the offensive linemen who falls, or maybe one of the pass rushers who falls, if you think you can get value and get, say, 45 and 72 or something thereabouts for 35,
that's what I want. That's what I want. I totally agree, because then you can go tight end or running back at 103 if you want. You can get so many other options. Middle linebacker, there's a couple really good ones there if you want to draft somebody. I don't think they will. I do think tight end and running back. They have not telegraphed tight end, but it's as close to telegraphing as possible that tight end is a priority for them and that this is a very good class to get tight end at value in the middle rounds. So we've said that about tight end and running back the entire draft process. They're going to take one of them. It's just going to be later.
I am more confident about the running back than I am about the tight end.
Agree. I think it has to be the right thing. You know,
look, are you going to get a tight end in the 4th or 5th round who is going to exceed the value of the tight ends you already have?
Maybe.
Running back, you're going to get somebody who does something different. You're going to get a power back. You're going to get a thumper. That's that. Tight end, I don't know. Brian Callahan's never been a guy who heavily features tight ends. Trying to think, maybe in Detroit they used tight ends a lot because they had some talent there, but definitely not since Cincinnati and Oakland. Did he overlap with Darren Waller? Maybe I can't.
Maybe. Joe says Loveland at 35. I have done some mocks where he fell to me at 35. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think a full 3-down starting tight end that gives you all things would be something they would look at. I think Terrence Ferguson could be that, which is why I've always liked him. I don't think Arroyo is that. Gunnar Helm is a little skinny in the britches for me, but I think he's a good pass catcher, and so you could get those guys a little bit later on. There's the kid out of Georgia Tech, which his name is escaping me, who's more of an inline blocker, but he's a professional tight end. You can get him in the 6th round.
Yeah,
and he might do something different than Chig and Josh Wiley.
Sure.
So,
and then QC, because you've hit me right in the Mustafa from Austin Powers zone, I have to answer if you've asked me 3 times. No, they're not going to take a running back at 35.
No, they're not.
I understand that they had him in for a visit. I would be very, very. If this team picks a running back at 35, I won't say they won't, because again, don't speak in absolutes. If they do, it will not be a smart decision.
Yeah. The trade back to like 18 or 21, where you get like a first and like 2 seconds and a 3/3, and you get like 6 or 7 picks, something insanely huge. That's where you can draft a running back in the 2nd round.
Yeah.
You need a whole lot of extra picks.
If they pick Cam Ward first, there is no world where they can get away with picking a running back before the 4th or 5th round.
I totally agree. In fact, I think the same thing for tight end and probably receiver, safety, linebacker, offensive line. You got to go edge. You got to get an edge player, because otherwise you're punting on the position altogether if you don't take one with your 2nd round pick in some form.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. Quickly, blue uniforms. We're going light blue according to Jimmy Wyatt.
Yeah.
So just that's going to be the main color in the uniforms, the baby blue, the light blue instead of the dark blue?
That will be the primary home uniform. Yeah.
I like it.
I agree. You guys have heard me talk about uniforms before. I think that the one truism is that the best uniforms ever are the uniforms that your favorite team wore when you were 12. So like, it's just how nostalgia works. You're nostalgic for the uniforms from when you were.
I'm not
formative. Well, then screw off.
I like
let me make up a truism. Just let me have this.
How about this to maybe tweak your theory, which is that I think like my uniforms that I like the most in college football, for example, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame,
classic clean.
They are kind of old school, right? They kind of, and that may be to your point. But my favorite version of Tennessee Volunteer football, Green Bay Packers uniforms, Tennessee Titans uniform, I cannot, because that version of me was the 90s. I think like the Carolina Panthers scream 90s uniforms. It screams clip art to me. And I think the Titans logo does too. I always have said that. I think their move to the uniform, the new uniforms a couple years ago, was a huge step in the right direction and is a major improvement. And I like the baby blue with the dark blue helmets. I think that works really well. I think it's great. I think it's a nice color. It differentiates you a little bit from everybody else in the league where there's a lot of blue. But so I don't like the 90s clip art style uniforms, which is my childhood, my middle school, elementary, middle school, high school. I like the nouveau stuff. I like the Tennessee uniforms today, Tennessee Volunteers, than over the ones in like the early 2000s, late 90s.
Sure. All of that was just me leading up to saying, so in the Chris Johnson era where the Titans were wearing the light blue a lot more than the dark blue, that's what I was used to, because that's around the age that I was caring about. That's about the age I was caring about uniforms, was when I was 12.
All right. Jake says one thing is for sure, it's exciting, and for all the content and ideas, it's fantastic from a fan standpoint. I assume talking about having the number 1 pick. I agree. It has been fun. It's been very interesting. Taking Cam Ward is fun and interesting. Trading back is fun and interesting because you're going to still get something interesting. The most boring thing you could do is like trade back to 18 and take like a tight end. Like that might be the best thing for your team. It's just not very exciting. Like I get it. Man, I want Cam Ward with Emeka Ibuka first 2 picks though. I could be on board with that.
Fun to watch. Be fun to watch.
All right. We're going to have links for you guys, so make sure you're following on the socials, checking out the YouTube page, subscribing for good journalism, of course, at the Tennessean. Make sure you do that. And so we'll have some links for you guys for tickets for the NFL draft party, the Sinkers, Beverages, Shotgun Willie's, 440 draft party. We're going to have something really fun for you guys planned on Saturday night, and we're going to have our great traditional Thursday night party as well. So please come on out. We'll get you those ticket links and that information shortly, so stay tuned for all of that. Obviously, special thanks, huge shout out to all of our great partners and sponsors that make stuff like that possible. All the money, of course, going to charity for the Our Kids Foundation. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, for Nick, I'm Braden. You got anything else? Good?
Watch baseball today. Baseball's cool, too. This isn't a baseball show, but there's baseball today.
College basketball and baseball this weekend. There you go.
One thing that I love and one thing that I haven't watched in 4 years.
Go Vols. Go Mets. Let's go. There you go. For Nick, I am Braden. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you guys. Me and Paul are back on Monday. Have a good weekend.